Hey, Brandon.
Hey, welcome to September 23rd, 2022 meeting of the Rotary Club of Beavercreek. Calm down up front, okay? How are you guys? I'd like to thank Beth and Dave Cusack today for being our greeters. Eric Marcus, our ticket master. Could have to update that. Ticket master helps me with the AV, which I really appreciate. Pete Bell, Mark Weinstein, and Mike Zwick for the great programs. I take credit for today's program though, and Jim Gundel for the website. So with that, Mr. Jarvie.
Good afternoon. Would you please join me in prayer? Oh, Holy Creator, thank you for this wonderful change in season. And as we are sitting here, may the assembled here today enjoy these offerings of Rotary. Maybe abide by the rules that we have established, those of trust, fellowship, and ethics. And may we place service above self in our daily endeavors. And may we always test ourselves in our efforts to be sure that they are the truth, that good for all concerned, a benefit to mankind, and provide peace and understanding. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, sir. Appreciate those voices. Joe.
I have 3 attendance and I don't have any yes.
Oh, yes. 49%.
Well, not that.
Mike was telling me not to make jokes about the fact that he showed up for once. It's not a joke. Okay. We're going to do Sergeant at Arms, who today, Don Adams is out for the next 2 weeks. So State Rep Mr. Lampton here, filling in.
Thank you very little. Oh, 6 o'clock this morning, 44 degrees. Clouds and sun today, high 60, 68. Yeah, that's what it says. Tomorrow 73, mostly sunny. Sunday about the same. So this week, the funeral and burial of a local hero took place. He died on September 11th at 101 years old. Of course, we're speaking of Jim Pee Wee Martin. He was a member of the 506th Parachute Infantry Airborne, known as the Screaming Eagles. So he was among the group who parachuted behind them and enemy lines on D-Day before the troops came onto the beach in an effort to disrupt the bad guys. He was parachuting well into his 90s. Pee Wee lived in Sugar Creek Township. Governor DeWine spoke Wednesday morning before he was transported to the VA and laid to rest. Oh, Bellbrook, yes. Bellbrook Middle School formed a group called Hope Squad. This group was created to help students who might be struggling. Their main focus is suicide awareness, but it encompasses all mental health issues. And it's a middle school group, so that's a positive news story. Karen, you'll like this one. Pepsi is launching a limited time s'mores collection. 3 flavors: toasty marshmallow, graham cracker, and chocolate. Sounds kind of gross to me, but they will come in little 7.5-ounce cans. They encourage folks to buy all 3, mix them together to get that s'mores flavor. Yeah, whatever. Beavercreek men's football. They are 2-3. They travel to Heber Heights this evening to face the 3-2 Wayne Warriors. Last week during their loss to Springfield, our kicker Sean Morse kicked a 39-yard field goal. Wow. And Colin's not here. Luke Kowalski had an 8-yard reception. So that was cool to see him in the stats. Then we had a touchdown called back on a penalty. Oh well. The Browns the AFC North at 2-1, beating the Steelers last night, 29-17. They play in Atlanta next Sunday. The Bengals are winless. And they face the Jets at 1 o'clock on Sunday. The number 3 Ohio State host 2-1 Wisconsin tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Buckeyes are favored by 19. On this day in history, in 1875, Billy the Kid is arrested for the first time after stealing a basket of laundry. He obviously elevated his criminal activities, later broke out of jail, and his rap sheet included an alleged 21 murders. In 1806, Lewis and Clark returned to St. Louis after their 2-year expedition. And in 1846, the planet Neptune is discovered by German astronomer Johann Gottfried Galley, or however you say it. Today, among many national days, it is National Checkers Day, National Great American Pot Pie Day. This one got me. National Snack Stick Day, whatever that is, and National Restless Leg Awareness Day. Be all right. Yes, I like top 10 lists. I saw this one was somewhat intriguing. The top 10 rags to riches story. Number 10, John D. Rockefeller. Of course, he and his friend Maurice Clark established a company. They built an oil refinery, and eventually he founded Standard Oil. Number 9, Liz Murray. She started homeless. Graduated high school in 2 years, attended Harvard, and today she's an international speaker. Number 8, this one threw me. Ozzy Osbourne. That was great. And we all know what he's famous for, biting heads off of bats. And number 7, J.K. Rowling. She wrote Harry Potter. Very good. In number 6, Richard Branson. He formed Virgin Records. This name I didn't know. Number 5, Chris Gardner. He obtained his brokerage license and started Gardner Rich and Company. So stockbroker kind of dude. This story sounds very familiar. Number 4, H. Wayne, mispronounce his name, Huizenga, started a garbage truck business with one truck, and that company eventually became Waste Management. Sound familiar? Oh, Tom's not here. And number 3, Jim Carrey. Apparently he started off pretty poor. Number 2, this one's, everybody knows this one, Andrew Carnegie. And number 1, Oprah Winfrey, rags to riches. So the year is 1911. The average expectancy for men was 47 years, life expectancy. 14% of homes at that time had a bathtub. 8% had a telephone. The maximum speed limit was, in most cities, 10 miles an hour. The average U.S. wage in 1910, 22 cents per hour. The average worker made between $200 and $400 a year. 95% of all births took place at home. Most women wash their hair once a month. They used borax or egg yolks for shampoos. Canada had a law that prohibited poor people from entering into their country. The leading causes of death: pneumonia and flu, tuberculosis, this one's bad, diarrhea, heart disease, and strokes. So heart disease and strokes are still there. Thank goodness nobody's dying from diarrhea anymore. The population of Las Vegas, Nevada at that time was 30. Marijuana, heroin, and morphine were all available over the counter at local drugstores. Probably go to Yellow Springs to get that stuff there now. But 18% of households, so 8% of households had a telephone, but 18% of households had one full-time servant. Go figure. All right, let's see here. The Ohio State coach was talking about one of his players. He said he doesn't know the meaning of the word fear. In fact, I just saw his grades. He doesn't know the meaning of a lot of words. Why did Tennessee fans wear orange so they could dress that way for game day on Saturday, go hunting on Sunday, and pick up trash on Monday? What does the average Alabama player get on his SATs? Drool. How many Michigan freshman football players does it take to change a light bulb? None. That's a sophomore course. Let's see here. What do you say to the University of Miami Hurricane football player dressed in a three-piece suit? Will the defendant please rise? I get this with Rick's not here. How can you tell if an Auburn football player has a girlfriend? There's tobacco juice on both sides of the pickup truck. And how do you get a former Illinois football player off your porch? You pay him for the pizza. A few days ago, I was at the local mechanic, and this very dizzy young lady came in asking for a 710. Kind of looked at each other and asked, what the heck is a 710? You know, a little piece in the middle of the engine. I lost it. I need a new one. She replied she didn't know exactly what it was, but the piece had always been there. Mechanic gave her a piece of paper and a pen and said, would you draw what it looked like? She drew a circle in the middle, wrote 710, 710. Took it over her and said, would you point it out? Where is it usually located in the engine? She pointed and said, yeah, right there. So if you're not sure what a 710 is, it's a visual joke. Some of my favorite one-liners. Money from pessimists, they don't expect it back. You know, half the people you know are below average. Where's Dave? He's over there. Yeah, Dave, you know this one. 99% of all lawyers give the rest of them a bad name. I almost had a psychic girlfriend, but she left me before we met. How do you know when you're out of invisible ink? Pays off in the future. Laziness pays off now. If Barbie is so popular, why do I have to buy her friends? And what happens if you get scared half to death twice? I do intend to live forever. So far, so good. Some birthdays today. In 63 BC, I thought that was going back a ways. The Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar, I don't know how the hell he knew today was his birthday, but they seem to know that. 1215, the Mongol Emperor Kublai Khan. In 1838, Victoria Woodhull, civil rights activist and presidential candidate in 1872. And I like this one because she is from Homer, Ohio. In 1920, Mickey Rooney. 1926, John Coltrane. In that name, jazz saxophone player. 1930, Ray Charles. 1943, NFL coach Marty Schottenheimer. A lot of music birthdays today. In 1949, the Boss, Bruce Springsteen. And in 1959, the actor from Seinfeld, Jason Alexander. I do have a few friends. If you've ever jumped out of an airplane, that'll be $1. If you have had a Pepsi this week, that'll be $1. And for each one, just one, you'd have to throw in 50 right there. If you have not been to any football games this season, let's see if we get anybody on this one. If you have played checkers at least once this year, anybody? His team doesn't know how to play. Let's see. If you owned any John Coltrane, Ray Charles, or Bruce Springsteen music. If you have never seen a Seinfeld episode. And I know this is sort of mean, but if you have been to an auto mechanic this week, that'll be $1. I know, because you've already paid it. Or your car's still there and you're waiting for it. And of course, no rotary pin will also cost you $1. And with that, we will go to Happy Bucks. If anybody has dollars left. I depressed everybody, Brandon, so sorry about that.
Okay, happy bucks.
I know you have one.
I always have happy bucks. Come on. I'll say it's for the kids.
One, when I've been on for so long, I'll start there. But I wanted to announce that Park State has received a $100,000 grant from the band Metallica for welding scholarship. So I'm very excited.
Who was the person who found the grant opportunity from Power? Nice. That's a niche grant.
They're very interactive.
I'm taking a grant writing course right now, so I know how hard it is to find the right opportunity. So that's very cool. Thank you. Who else? Oh, is it really that depressing this week? Ma'am.
I don't think the distribution center in my little part just died because it was Pepsi and Mountain Dew everywhere. And it's not about to go. You should see if they can get your floor. And they are hiring and they're providing CDL training for people who are having a hard time. So if somebody has a hard time finding the job that they want, and they're pushing that they promote with it.
Is this the one over off the 444 right by 675?
Yeah.
Nice. That's a new facility, I think, in the past couple of years. Who else? Okay, I'll go with 2. I did the Air Force 10K last week. Dick and I really duked it out. It was a nail biter, but I edged him. And I won the race, which was really nice to go back to Air Force Marathon and win one of the events and see a lot of friends. And get the award that I ordered for the event. So in 2, I'm going to be speaking in 2 weeks at Outdoor X, the big festival they have at Eastwood Metro Park, put on by 5 Rivers, big 2-day event. It's fantastic if you've never been. It's all things outdoors. But on the Sunday at 3, birding for beginners. So I don't know what my qualifications are outside of the fact that I like taking pictures of birds, but they're letting me give the talk. So come see that. And I don't know, a 3rd one, because I'm happy about today's guest speaker, Scott, who I'll be introducing here in a moment. Very excited about that. So Shannon, you're obligated to give a happy buck.
Sidebar. Well, last weekend was awesome with the golf outing. It was the first time I done a golf outing with a hockey team. It's a little bit rowdier bunch than I am expected. That means that we are kicking off hockey season, so I'll have to give you updates on how we reached over time.
Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else? Ma'am.
tomorrow, and we will be at the Ohio State Wisconsin game the whole day. Everybody.
Okay, there's no more. Ticket drawing. 117634. Down in front here.
you go.
Who's waiting? It's his first time holding a card there. I know. Pick apart. It was actually legalized a couple of years ago. Forget it. Pick apart.
That ought to be easy, so, all right. Well, there it is, right there.
Yeah, I know. No, the pot grows. Does anyone have any announcements for the club? Ma'am.
Sign up sheet here for October 9th to man the comfort station for the Tour de Gem, which takes place at Trevine Elementary. We've done it for the past couple of years. We have one best comfort station because we go all out. We cheer, we have horns, we have music playing, we have listening stations, all kinds of good things. So if you would like to join, and pickle juice is a good thing.
By the way.
So if you'd like to join us, there's kind of
Bonus is if you sign up, you get to hang out with me all day because I'll be there. So as if Friday at lunch is not enough, Brandon. Yeah. Okay, any other announcements? Okay, with that, I want to introduce our speaker today. We have with us Mr. Scott Sanders, who is the archivist at Antioch College. I first met Scott only a few months ago on the day I interviewed. He was kind enough to give me a tour. We were supposed to do the whole campus, but with how I talk and how curious I am, I don't think we made it but 100 meters, and we're talking Civil War, and we just went off. Scott is an encyclopedia of all things Antioch and all things Yellow Springs, and knows just a tremendous amount of the history of our area. He's written a book. I always get the name wrong. I always just call it an episodic history of Antioch College. It's a series of short stories that he's written over the years and compiled them. I read it right when I first started to get a better idea of Antioch, and it's a weird college with a weird history, and he knows it better than anybody. So he's always great to talk to. Even just yesterday, I spoke with an alumni from the 70s who was telling me about a strike that they, are not a strike, a protest outside the gates of Wright Pat, where he sat out there with a few hundred other students. They all got arrested and were in jail for a few days. And I emailed Scott this morning within 10 minutes. He's like, here's a photo of it. Then like 10 minutes later, he's like, here's an article about it. Scott is just an incredible resource. And I hope that you all find that Antioch is a great part of our community. I knew too little about it even just a few months ago, but thanks to working there and thanks to Scott, I've learned a tremendous amount, and every day I learn more. So with that, Scott. If you use this, you have to speak very close to it. Otherwise, you could just project.
Not really interested in microphone.
There you go.
Hey, Brandon. Nice to see everybody. At my first ever Rotary Club. What do you know? This talk I put together actually last year for our new incoming president, Jane Fernandez, and some new students. And I based it on this idea that here are some things that you should know about Antioch College. This is the earliest known photograph of our campus, taken about 1860. If you spend any time at Antioch College, the first thing that you might notice is there are no trees. The entire 20 acres that comprised our original campus were entirely clear cut at the time that the college was built. It's a great question to ask, why do we call it Antioch College? And the answer is because in the book of Acts, it says that the disciples of Jesus were first called Christians in a city called Antioch. It might seem counterintuitive what you think about Antioch College, but we were established by Christians. A tiny Protestant sect called the Christian Church comes around the 1790s, comes out of the Great Awakening when there was great fervor and the expansion of conversion of souls, and also a lot of splintering of Protestant denominations. And the Christian Church was just one of those. They're either Millerites or Campbellites, I can never remember, but that is why we call it Antioch College. And the originator of the name is this fellow, the elder Reverend Joseph Badger, who at the time that the college was being established was late in his life, was a well-respected member of the denomination. And so the founders of the school went to him and asked him, because of their great regard for him, would he contribute an inspirational quote that they would carve over the door to the college library. And so Badger's response was, the disciples were first called Christians at Antioch, call the college Antioch, which was definitely inspired, but I'd like to point out that's not what they asked him for. Nonetheless, they liked Joseph Badger so much that that's the thing that they went with. This guy was our very first president, one of the most famous Americans of his time, Horace Mann. Mann is a great hero to Antioch College, and we call our students, graduates, and dropouts all Antiochians, and they all look toward him for inspiration. In the mid-19th century, he was a really famous guy. He was a great speaker, which, you know, was kind of a rock and roll star for the period of that time. He was known as an anti-slavery attorney and a politician. He was in state senate in Massachusetts, where he helped establish the first ever college for training teachers, and also the first ever state board of education in U.S. history in Massachusetts. And so, having created this board, he was then asked to be its first ever secretary. And so for 12 years, he served in this post, and he wrote an annual report each year. So 12 annual reports. And these are the basis for the public education system as we know it in this country. So he's known as the father of public education in America and one of America's great educators, although he spent almost no time in the classroom, at least at the head of the classroom, except he was a teaching assistant in Latin when he was at Brown. It's a common misconception that Horace Mann founded Antioch, but I assure you, Antioch found Horace. He was at that time in his life thinking about, his next gig, although he was really of retirement age, and so highly regarded himself that almost everybody that he knew thought that him coming out to the West, which this was in the 1850s, was basically a fool's errand. He certainly could have sat on his front porch in Boston, Massachusetts for the rest of his life and done very little, but that was just not him. I love this particular illustration of him, which is made by his sister-in-law, Sophia Peabody Hawthorne. She was a gifted artist, and her husband was one of America's great novelists of the time, Nathaniel Hawthorne. Mann is generally thought of as a severe and humorless kind of guy. And so it's another reason I like this picture, because you get just a very hint of a smile in the corners of his mouth. Mann had several conditions to coming to Antioch College. One of them was that he be able to make 2 faculty appointments. This is one of them, Rebecca Pennell. Rebecca was Horace Mann's niece. And so, as I usually say in this instance, a little nepotism never hurt anybody. However, she is the most highly trained and qualified member of the first Antioch College faculty. She's a graduate of the teaching school that her uncle had founded, along with her brother Calvin. He's the other one. The rest of the first faculty were all ministers of the Christian church and were advertised to the Pennell siblings as so zealous they would do the job for free. I think that was supposed to make them think, oh, we'll do that too. But no, they got paid. And Rebecca has a mouthful of a famous first in American history. She is the first ever woman college professor to have equal status to the men on the rest of the faculty. It's a tough one to get through, but it's definitely hers. We have a building on campus that was her house, and it's called Pennell House. And it's where you find our counseling services and our student medical setup. I'd love to tell you that Horace had a great, victorious, successful presidency, but not really. While he was, just an absolutely dominant figure on campus, the college labored under terrible financial conditions because of the college's founding principles, which I'll get to. Man was constantly in conflict with our board of trustees and the founding denomination, who were very upset that the college was not a seminary. And then he also had effectively a rebellious faculty and rebellious students. And his wife hated it here. And so he was president of Antioch College for 6 years. He gave the first 3 baccalaureate addresses. And after he gave his third one in 1859, he said these timeless words: "Be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity." And so that's what he said to the class of 1859. And 2 months later, he was dead. And so this is the last line in a life filled with great oratory. You can find an endless number of Horace Mann quotes and quotation books and on the internet. And then this timeless prose was made immortal with the obelisk that you see here. It was erected right on the spot where Horace Mann was buried by a later president, Daniel Long, in the 1880s. And he had that phrase carved into it, and we've carved it into our alumni ever since. And so Antiochians are chased and tortured and inspired by this line, and they can all recite it from memory. Horace is no longer buried under this obelisk. However, his wife came back during the Civil War and dug him up and had him buried in Providence, Rhode Island, next to the body of his first wife, who was the daughter of the president of Brown. So it is Horace Mann's grave, but it isn't anymore. The twin founding principles of the college were a great attraction, first to Mann and then later to the students. And that was that it was a non-sectarian school. That's what really angered our founders, which is to say, we would not teach our students our peculiar brand of Christianity. We would not issue a divinity degree, and that we would be co-educational. And so from our founding, men and women attended the same classes together, had access to the same degrees. And let me tell you, this was a positively scandalous position to take in the mid-19th century. Oberlin College, who we always unfavorably compare ourselves to, is first in admitting women to college in the 1830s. But their women students did not have access to the bachelor's degree, nor could they do what every college student worked toward at that time, which was to be able to write and deliver from memory a stirring oration on graduation day. This was what today we would call that your capstone project. The photo here, by the way, is the class of 1857, the very first graduating class at Antioch College, and includes, as you can see, 3 remarkable women. The fact that Mann was at the college is one of the reasons that people came, because he was so highly regarded. And right there is one of our most prominent graduates of the early period. Her name is Olympia Brown. She was class of 1860. And she has another famous first. She's the first ever ordained woman minister in American history. She was also an important suffrage activist. And while she ran with the likes of Lucy Stone and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, she turns out to be the only member of the suffrage movement's leadership to actually live long enough to cast her vote in 1920. I like Olympia a lot. What we generally do with Antioch history is we fast forward from the death of Horace Mann to the 1920s. So just trust me on that. We existed all throughout that period. This is the delightful hand-colored postcard of the college campus in the early 20th century. It has one of my favorite architectural details in the entire place right here, which is attached to North Hall, our women's dormitory, and that is a 4-story brick heated outhouse. And it was there until the 1920s when this guy became our president. His name is Arthur Morgan. Arthur Morgan was a flood control engineer by trade, and he came to Dayton after the great 1913 flood, which was the game-changing event in this area, to solve our flood problems. And because he was in town doing that, he became our president, and you'll have to just trust me on that. This is one of his flood control solutions, and the genius that was Arthur Morgan. Despite having 6 weeks of college and never finishing high school, he was one of the preeminent builders of dams, certainly of his time, if not American history. This is Lockington Dam. It's one of 5 dams that was constructed for the Miami Conservancy District that would prevent us from flooding. Now, there's one that's very close to here, Huffman Dam behind Rice State campus. And I thought about showing that for locality purposes, but it's just not as picturesque a shot as Lockington. This is up in Shelby County. The idea of the Conservancy flood control is that the problem that happened in the 1913 flood was the same problem that happens to Pittsburgh all the time. And that is we have multiple rivers all coming together at once. And when one of them can't hold, the biblical levels of flood that was the 1913, then they all spill their banks. Morgan's idea was that there would be a way to slow down the water coming from the tributaries that feed the Mad and the Great Miami and the Stillwater. And if you just could slow it down enough, then downriver, like by Hamilton, they could, they could take the extra water. So Morgan gets the job, and a guy named Charles Kettering gave him that job because they made an open casting call, the Miami Valley Flood Protection Committee, and engineers all over the country contributed solutions, most of which were your levees downtown aren't high enough. If you know anything about the Dayton flood, the levees all failed. And if you've seen photographs of downtown Dayton before 1913, the levees are so high you have to be in a 2nd-story window to see the river. So clearly that was not the correct solution. When they asked Morgan what his idea was, he said, surveyor by trade, I don't know, I haven't seen the land yet. And they said, you're hot. He didn't really like it. And so his idea was, like I say, to have dams that go astride all of these tributaries that would control the flow into the city. These dams are all made of earth and concrete. There's no moving parts. One of the things that he realized was no one was using these rivers to take their goods to market anymore. So simply make them unnavigable. So this is actually the river itself going through the sluice gate here. And inside there is a concrete washboard that's underneath the water and just simply slows down the flow of the water. It's all there is to it. He hired thousands of workers to do this thing. And each one of the dams does the same thing. And if you've ever spent your time on the other side of the dam, every one of them has a park on the other side. I heard reference to the river park system. That's why we have it, is because of Morgan's Miami Conservancy District. And that was something that just flabbergasted people because usually you build dams to hold back water all the time. But dams were only required when the conditions like the 1913 flood were present. And so what do you do with the other side of the dam? You build a park. What a great idea. He also came up with the legislation to build this system, conservancy law. And so we residents of the Miami Valley, if we lived there at the time, we would have had the opportunity to vote on whether we wanted flood control. What happens a lot of the time when a dam gets built is government simply exercises eminent domain and the people don't have any say. People were still pretty upset about, fat cats getting rich off this thing. But one of the many astounding things about the Miami Conservancy District is that no public money went into it. It was almost entirely private funds. Maybe you've seen the photos of the fundraising at the courthouse in downtown Dayton with the great sign that says, "Remember the promise you made in the attic?" Of all the people that had to go to the upper floors of their house in order to escape the flood. One of my and Brandon's colleagues lives in McPherson, which is a neighborhood that was underwater. And all of Tristan's neighbors are brag about the water lines that they have in their house because it actually survived the whole thing. This is actually a story about Antioch College. So in 1920, Arthur Morgan finished with the dam system, which, by the way, has held back 1,000 floods since it went online, several meeting the same conditions as the Great Flood. He was made president of Antioch College. Antioch College, if you could tell by that postcard, was still a painfully tiny little school. And what he did was he brought in all of these changes to the running of the college, which, by the way, the board was considering selling us to the YMCA when he came along. And brought in these notions of what he called industrial education, learning things by doing. That's a John Dewey concept, if you know your American philosophy. The fact that there's just as much to learn outside the classroom as there is inside the classroom. This is Morgan at the Cascades in Yellow Springs in the nature preserve that we call Glen Helen. The nature preserve is credited to Morgan and a member of the class of 1869 who bought all the land across the street from the campus and gave it to us. His name was Hugh Taylor Birch. I wish I could tell you that the Glen still belongs to us, but it is now its own organization. Morgan, just like Horace Mann, regarded as a great educator, did not do much teaching. But this is a photograph that we use quite a lot to show that he did some. He liked to especially teach a course called Life's Meaning, as if he knew what that was. Nonetheless, we use this photo all the time. Morgan's ideas about industrial education included, for instance, building factories on campus. For a while, we made shoes. Maybe you've heard of Antioch shoes. Nobody's made them since the 50s, but they do in fact exist. I'd love to get my hands on one, a pair from the archives, actually. If you got one in your closet, let me know. And flour and bronze art, these were all ideas that these factories would produce products that our students would work in, generate revenue for the school, and then they would, make a wage that would allow them to stay in school. This is not too dissimilar from the very distinctive Berea College in Kentucky, for instance. But what was a very successful component of industrial education is something we still do today. It's called cooperative education. So it's an alternating system of work at a job and study on campus. These are the kinds of jobs that the Morgan era Antioch was able to obtain for students. Research jobs in laboratories, construction on vast public works, and broadcasting. So a wide range of job opportunities for students. If you talk to our graduates, by and large, they don't remember the classes that they took. They might remember their roommate. What they really remember are the jobs that they went on. So it's a really remarkable experience. And it came from the guy who built the dams for the Miami Valley. The college that he created also attracted a wide range of students, oftentimes a more adult, student who was more interested in working than attending a football game. We played our last football game in 1928. And among the graduates and students that we attracted was this young woman who's Coretta Scott. She came to Antioch to study music following her sister Edith from Alabama. She finished her education at New England Conservatory. She was a gifted singer, where she met a young theology student working on his PhD at Boston U, Martin Luther King Jr. And so she is among our most prominent graduates.
Who was her baby?
A tricler. Yeah, so we talked to people who said at reunions who said that they babysat her. She attended in the late 40s. Now this is really bothering me, but that person came to reunion. In any event, it also attracted veterans, and specifically, this one's one of my favorite, class of 1950, Rod Serling. I love how he's wearing his airborne wings as a lapel pin. And the shirt I'm wearing today is actually an homage to the television show he created. He had this nutty idea of having putting social change on television and disguising it as science fiction. And what a cutie. He met his wife there, Carol, and also had quite a number of broadcasting co-ops, like at WLW in Cincinnati. He actually started his broadcasting career in Cincinnati and started writing science fiction for television for local television before getting his job in New York. And this is just a story, a biographer of Serling told me that Rod would leave Cincinnati, fly to New York to meet with, NBC, CBS broadcasting types, and stay in a hotel and try to act like he didn't live in Ohio, because he was afraid that, coming from the Midwest was going to hurt his negotiations on his television show. It apparently worked. Another one of our graduates attracted by cooperative education was Eleanor Holmes. She's class of 63. This is an excerpt from an enormous panoramic photograph that we took of all the students and faculty a couple of times a year. She's one of my favorite examples of, I'll say, the undervalued value of cooperative education. Like, you might go on a co-op job and discover the thing you want to do for the rest of your life. You might go on a co-op job and be like, man, I never want to do that again. And so this, I think, is an equally valuable lesson to learn. Eleanor Holmes came to Antioch as a pre-med major. Her dad was a physician in Washington, D.C. On her first hospital co-op, following her first hospital co-op, she changed to pre-law. She would go on to a really prominent career as a civil rights attorney. She worked in the ACLU. She clerked for another prominent Antiochian, class of 49, A. Leon Higginbotham, who was a federal circuit court judge. And she's the first woman head of the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. And she is today the delegate to Congress for the District of Columbia. I think the conditions are actually as ripe as they'll ever be for DC to have statehood. And it's what she's worked for ever since she's had that job. One of my favorites. Some of our students don't stay. This fella dropped out very quickly, but he still lives in the area. His name is Jorma Kaukonen. And Jorma came to Antioch, actually was raised in the Caribbean, and was a musician. And he basically dropped out of Antioch to join a band called Jefferson Airplane. And so he was in the Airplane for a long time. He was later the guitar player for a band called Hot Tuna. And he today owns a guitar ranch outside of Athens, Ohio. And can often be seen, near the Ohio University campus. So an interesting array of students that came to the college that Arthur Morgan created. This is Arthur and his wife Lucy, and the fellow we mentioned earlier, Hugh Taylor Birch, class of 1869. Birch made a fortune in real estate in Chicago and in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And that's where Mrs. Morgan found him. And this is in Brandon's line of work. It's trying to get people to give the college money. And Birch was not nearly as interested in giving us money as he was in giving us land, which is what he was awfully good at. So he's the guy who bought up all the land across the street, gave it to us in 1929, I think. And all we had to do was name it after his deceased daughter, Helen. And that was a pretty easy thing to do. At his death in the 1940s, he gave us money for a dorm that we built in his name, Birch Hall. Birch Hall is one of our most famous buildings, and then it really has to do with the architect. The fellow's name is Eero Saarinen. And at that time, he was not yet famous, but his most famous works still stand, primarily a great big arch in St. Louis, and a couple of airport terminals that look like they could fly. The Dulles, the main Dulles terminal, and what they used to call JFK, and now they call it JetBlue in New York City. Burgess remains our most popular dormitory. He gave us money for that. He also gave us land in Fort Lauderdale, which netted us several $1 million when we developed it, and a mangrove swamp that we turned into one of the first shopping malls in Florida, which we sold in the 70s. So one of our big sugar daddies, Hugh Taylor Birch. Hugh is perhaps also famous in one of Antioch's few famous moments in sports. And that is in 1869, which would have been his graduation year. He pitched our team to a 41-7 loss to the Cincinnati Red Stockings. That year, the Red Stockings were the first team in the country to admit that they paid all their players. So they are considered the first professional team. We were a tune-up game for them before they embarked on a 79-game barnstorming tour in which they won every game. So they were absolutely they were already the best cricket club, by the way, in the country before switching to baseball. And this is Hugh right here, holding the baseball. Had a rough day on the mound, though. And then I mentioned earlier that we had a football team for a while, from about the 1880s to the 1920s. This is a photograph of our very last football team, and played his last game in the fall of 1928. It's what I call a merciful death, the end of Antioch College football. Especially this season is what is illustrative. They went 1-6 that year, beat Cedarville. And that was the only game they scored. And so if you get shut out the rest of your season, maybe you should try something else. One of the reasons that this happened, though, is because the co-op work study schedule of people going off on a job and coming back to campus to study was 5 weeks. And that meant that halfway through your season, you had to replace your whole team. So that's a problem. Now, one of the reasons I think I'm here is that some of you think that we're closed. That was 13 years ago. And that's when, and that's why I thought I would close with the fact that we're open. But we did close. I was there for. My boss was actually the person who closed us, because what happened was in the 1960s and 70s, Antioch College expanded across the country with multiple extension campuses to the point that there were 35 places that called themselves Antioch College. It's pretty crazy. It was the 70s. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And then in 1978, it was pared down to a more manageable number, and our entire corporation was reincorporated as Antioch University. And that's because we'd obtained, for instance, graduate school. And it was Antioch University who decided that, you know, in order to save the village, they would destroy it by closing the only residential component of the system. You can tell from this cartoon that Rod's not too pleased about this. And I actually just saw our last college president a memorial service in New York City, which was really quite a nice surprise. There they are, Antioch University, the people who closed us. They're still around. I try not to think about them too much. And this is what happens when you close Antioch College is you have the biggest reunion in history. Like 700 of our grads came to protest this decision. And that's when I realized that even if you're mad at your school, you still don't want it to close. But it didn't stay closed for very long, a couple of years. But one of the things that happened during then, this is the library that I work in. And what Antioch U thought of us is that we might be a nice place to have a SWAT team exercise. You can actually see a film of this on the internet. You probably have to go to archive.org to do so. It's called Antioch Confidential. That was not a good day. But in the fall of 2009, we finally got the keys back, thanks to a 66 grad, Lee Morgan, whose grandfather was that guy Arthur who built dams that we were talking about, and my first boss in the new organization, Matthew Dirk, class of '89. And I thank you so much for your kind attention.
2 questions. All at once.
Yeah.
So Camp Hugh Taylor Bird.
Yep.
How did that come into play?
Well, he's a land guy, right? And he also loves camping. So he bought that land and he gave it to the Boy Scouts. Yeah. Quite a guy. I've got a whole lecture about him. He's a real, what was the rags to riches thing we were talking about earlier? He should have made that top 10 list. He makes model.
A professor that you guys went through a period where you gave free ride tuitions.
That's right.
For a track. A little bit about
Sure.
this track.
Yeah, great question. When the college was closed, we lost our accreditation, which is a key component of being a college. So when we reopened, our board of trustees decided that any students that were coming to Antioch were doing so on a leap of faith. While we were worked toward regaining our accreditation. So what they did was they created something called the Horace Mann Fellowship, which was free tuition that made us for 2 years one of the most selective colleges in the country. Like the second year we put it out, the Wall Street Journal reported on it. And suddenly everybody who worked there was in the admissions business. That was the only time I ever read applications of students. And we picked like 38 kids out of 5,000 applications. So it's not a very sensitive comment, but pick of the litter. And so that was our first 5 classes as we worked toward our accreditation, which we achieved again in 2017. Great question.
And one more.
Huh?
You got, like,
So it's still very small, about 136. Which I was there when there were 0, so that's progress.
Last question back here.
That was actually my
Okay.
question also. I was just meant Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna work too to have Jane Fernandez come speak, who's our current president. She's wonderful.
She's delightful.
She came from Guilford College. She was the first president of a college in the US to be deaf. She's overcome a lot of adversity in her own life. She's a wonderful fit at the college.
Woman president in history.
Yeah, second woman president in our history. She's fantastic and she is doing everything right to address a lot of the issues we've had over the years.
Yeah.
So
I don't say that about presidents too much. Yes, sir.
Was Arthur Morgan considered for being the first city manager of Dayton?
Oh, hell no.
I've done some research and there was a lot of prestigious people they tried to get. I was just curious, do you know anything about?
No, I don't believe that he ever had any aspiration to public office, although a city manager is an appointment.
Correct.
But probably not, because he jumped pretty much from the Conservancy to Antioch College. And then I should add, he jumped from Antioch College to directing the Tennessee Valley Authority. So he was probably too busy.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
How did you end up in the position the archivist at Antioch?
I came in '94 as a graduate student at Wright State, needing a 300-hour internship, which apparently I'm still completing. And as I'm fond of pointing out, although my mother denies this, this was the one college I was not permitted to apply to.
Because of the expense?
And the communism, yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, Scott has a way of rubbing off on people. You know, there are so many people, the students, when I talk to the college and they meet Scott, I go, what are you studying? And they'll be like, oh, well, you know, I'm kind of doing this, but I'm kind of interested in like archive studies. I'm like, you can spend too much time with Scott. Like he just rubs off on these students. And I mean, as you heard from his talk, just a breadbasket of knowledge. And I mean, barely even covering anything right there because as you were talking, I could just think of more stuff and more stuff. And I asked the question on Coretta Scott King was the babysitter for John Lithgow when he was in Yellow Springs, and so he donated a lot of money when we opened the Coretta Scott King Center. And last year, oh yeah, there you go. See, it goes deep. And John Lithgow did a big fundraiser for us last year where he was reading some scripts and helped us raise a lot of money. So. Scott, thank you for coming. Like I said, I'll try to get Jane Fernandez here in the next few months. So we're going to donate a book on his behalf, Monet's Cat, to the Beavercreek Library. Scott's already signed it, and thank you for that, Beth. Next week's greeters, Brian and Karen. Next week's speakers, Shannon Graham, covering Rotary Youth Leadership Awards. Don't worry, that's when I'm here. So I put it in the notes. You've got all week to prepare for. Anything else for the good of the club? Okay, with that, Scott, will you lead us in pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very good. Thank you all. Have a great weekend. Thank you.